Greetings to all and welcome, and thanks for joining us today. And most importantly, happy World FM Day. We want to share a special thank you to all facility professionals. You are heroes making a difference each and every day. We have an excellent discussion prepared, but before we get started, please tell us where you're tuning in from in the comments. And be sure to like this video so others in your network can also enjoy today's session. Today we'll be sharing best practices and recommendation from IFMA's Facility Manager's Guide to Procuring Technology report. You can purchase the full detailed report in IFMA's bookstore. And as a reminder, IFMA members can download the executive summary for free. IFMA is dedicated to providing FM's practical tools, and this report does just that. In addition to today's study, we also complete core reports focusing on O&M benchmarking, space planning, lifecycle costing, outsourcing, technology procurement, ESG insights, and more. These key global reports will be valuable resources facility managers can depend on IFMA providing consistently. Be sure to watch for our surveys as they are released and participate. Your input is critical to providing the best reports for the industry. Also, participants, members and non-members, who complete the survey and make themselves available for data validation when needed will receive a free copy of the final report. And now, on to today's session. Our presenter is Jake Smithwick, PhD, MPA, FNP, SFP, Associate Professor, and Graduate Program Director with the Construction and Facilities Engineering Department at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. Over to you, Jake.
All right, thank you so much, Nick, and thank you all for being here today. Super excited. If you haven't introduced yourself, be sure to do so on your platform. I see we got folks from all over the world here. We got Cameroon, Algeria, Toronto, Indiana, California, all sorts of places. So be sure to introduce yourselves, tell us where you're from, and we're excited to be here. Our team does a lot of work on technology procurement in general. And so when we partner with IFMA to develop more guidance and recommendations for facility folks about how to buy their next technology solution, we jumped at the opportunity. And so we're very thankful to be here today. And again, don't be bashful. If you have questions or comments, be sure to jump onto the comments box, and we'll certainly take a look at them. So our agenda for today, we'll go through some of the research questions that kind of frame the structure of our report. We'll go through the details of the technology procurement report itself. And then we'll also offer some thoughts and perspectives about the current state of where things are and where we see things going into the future. We're also going to do some demonstrations of not all the tools, but some of the main tools that are included inside the report, so that if you choose to purchase this report, you'll kind of get a feel for what this can provide here. So with that said, let's keep going here. So when we think about why we worked on this report, if you have been involved in a technology procurement or an acquisition or an implementation from the technology space, what you know is that it's really difficult, right? I have talked to a lot of procurement folks and just broadly across the industry of folks that do work in this space in IT and technology and new tools, and it's really, really difficult. There's a couple of reports out there that kind of highlight this. The Chaos report, they found that 70% of IT projects are challenged or failed from the beginning, right? I mean, imagine that. If you have a project you're about to take on and there's a 70% likelihood that the project's going to have issues, that's just, we know that's going to happen. We've seen that all the time. It's really common. Another study by Oxford and McKinsey, 66% of IT projects have cost overruns, 33% have schedule overruns, a 70% shortfall in actual scope versus the original plan, right? There was another study that looked at IT executives, managers of projects, and of these people, they talked with 600 people, 3/4 of them admitted that projects were failed or almost always failed right from the start, right? So when you think about working in this space here, folks, right, we know it's an uphill battle, it's a challenge, and there's lots of things that are with that, right? One of the main reasons why this is here is that let's think about, let's say, construction, for example, managing a construction project, right? So ask yourself here, how long has construction been around as a field? And if you think about it, the answer, of course, is thousands of years. I mean, we've built things for millennia, and we kind of know how to do that, right? If you think about the skill sets in the IT space and the technology with that, that's really only developed the last 20, 30 years. I mean, in earnest. I mean, obviously, there's been different things over the years, but in terms of a technology procurement, the way we see it today, the skill sets or the competencies that are needed to deliver these projects are just not as well developed compared to other sectors like construction, right? So that's one of the main things that we need to think about and keep that in mind as we go through and understand why this was so difficult. So really two main questions we thought about with this report. Once an FM organization has decided to buy new technology, how should they go about procuring it? That's the first question we wanted to answer with this report. The second question we focused on is what are the best practices, resources, steps in buying FM-focused software, right? How do we actually go about and do that, right? Many times it's, call up a couple of vendors, look at some demos, pick your favorite, and then we have problems, right? And that's the traditional, typical mindset. And our goal here is to talk about and offer some specific guidance as to how you can do that more effectively and look out for some of the pitfalls as you go forward and take this on here, right? So a little bit of nomenclature. When we talk about technology, this broadly means all sorts of things. And when I say technology or IT or whatever you're looking at here, what I mean by that is software. So on your computer, a website, some sort of application that you use. This is the hardware, so the physical assets. So this could be security cameras. It could be some sort of sensors that monitor the building or other physical type things that we're looking at. Data management and analytics. This one is really interesting. In fact, this is a very new topic that's really coming about is as FM, if you think about it, we actually have access to a lot of data, right? We have different, smart devices that are reporting constant information about everything we have here. And so there's technologies out there that can help us understand and manage that data more effectively. And then, of course, various professional services that tie all these systems together, that take a new system and integrate it with your existing platforms in your organization and the knowledge behind in terms of how to do that, right? And specifically, as we went through and as we did our studies and as we developed this report, our focus on is as a FM, what is your role on this technology procurement, right? Many times I've seen that as an FM, we are receivers of procurement, meaning that there's the FM group and there's the procurement group. And procurement does what they want to do. They hand us our technology and it is what it is, right? What we advocate for is to break down the silos between these two different groups is that at an FM, our role here is to help develop the scope, is to be participating in the evaluation process. And really, because if you follow the guidance that's provided inside this report, you can actually lead and help provide that guidance to the organization on finding the best technology solution, right? So we're going to go through this in detail here, but when we think about the life cycle of a technology project, kind of helping us set the stage here, there's really 5 different phases that we think about as we go through this, right? There's a master planning, which is really that go, no-go decision, which means what our needs are. Do we actually need to buy something? And if so, that moves into the procurement phase of that, which is when you're actually buying the software. After you've gone through and identify the software, we get to the legal phase of it, which means contracting and all that exciting stuff related to contracts and terms and all sorts of related items with that. There's the deployment of the technology, so actually rolling it out to the organization, and then finally, long-term adoption, right? Each of these reports could be a separate 100-page report in terms of how to do it, guidance and recommendations, but our focus here is just on the procurement side of things, right? So if you've decided to buy a technology, how do we go out and procurement? We'll have some discussions throughout the report about especially the deployment and long-term adoption of it, but really our focus of this is how do we actually go out and identify and evaluate different software solutions. Okay, so let's dive into the report now and look at some of the different details and structure of the report itself, right? So when we think about the report structure, there's really a couple major components to this. The first one is that we wanted to get a better understanding of the current state of IT procurement in FM, right? So when you think about the report, we would look at a bunch of different IT RFPs, so actual projects that were focused on FM in the tech space. And we looked at where the common criteria, the weights, challenges, timelines, things like that. We put together an RFP library. So we took all these FM tech RFPs and we have a website with that has all the RFPs laid out. And there's about 20 different technology types that are included with that, right? The second part of this report is focused on different technology spotlights. So we have case studies for them. So a room reservation system, a CMMS, access control for a healthcare group, and then a work order management system, this for a utility company. And we talk about some of the nuances in buying this type of tech space. We also talked about the vendor's perspective and actually how they engage on the technology procurement side of things. There's three different views of that, and we'll talk about what that entails. The next part of the report focuses on the major takeaways in terms of how do we actually do it. We talk about common challenges, lessons learned, how do we gather the scope of requirements in the RFP, and also we provide some guidance and recommendations as to how we can include that for the report. When you think about the next section of the report is preparing for an IT implementation, really our focus here is once you've decided to do that and you pick the right vendor, what's next? And again, like I said, you could write a whole 100-page report about how to actually do that, but we do offer some thoughts about that. One of the main things I want you to think about is that when you roll out a technology buy, this is different from like a new renovation or a construction project, is this organizational change management component of that. Is that when you think about a IT project and buying that, organizational change should be synonymous with that. Those are one and the same, frankly, from our perspective, because it's fundamentally affecting business processes, how we manage our facility, and that requires us to change how we do things, right? So it's important to keep that in mind as we go through and do that. We also have a section about future forecast of what's included, what's coming down the line today, the next 5 years, the next 10 years. And then finally, there's various tools, resources, and other things that are included that we'll highlight, excuse me, as we go through this report. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into some of the current status with regards to technology reports here, right? So data collection, we collect a bunch of RFPs from different folks here, work order management, CMMS, asset management, all sorts of different systems here. So we collected a bunch of RFPs. We got about 100 RFPs altogether from the last 5 years. So these are pretty recent RFP types. Again, here's the different technology types that are included with that. And with these RFPs, we decided to go through and we went in and evaluated each of the RFPs for how they were structured and what's included, right? A high-performing RFP, to kind of set the stage here, includes 7 key sections, right? And now this is important here, right? If you're taking notes, this is where you should pull out your pen and paper, I guess, or maybe your Word document, because this is technology, right? 7 key sections of a high-performing RFP. This is how you should structure to have a good experience. The first one here is going to be the statement of work, and what this describes is what you want to achieve. The second part of this are the current conditions, meaning where are you at today in your organization for this specific space that you're looking to buy something in. The third part of this is what's going to be evaluated, how are you going to make the award decision, what are you actually asking the vendors to turn in for their proposal requirements. The fourth section here is how you're going to score and make the final award determination. We have administrative requirements, which is your basic general instructions, dates, when you have to submit, contact information, things like that. Number 6 here is proposal forms. Now, when I talk about proposal forms, what I mean by this is that if you require the vendors to provide you information as an owner, there should be a form attached to it. Nothing should be left to the vendors or anybody's own whatever to do here. In terms of what those reports include here, right? So if you're collecting information from the vendors, be sure to go through and have some guidance about what you want them to submit, the format and structure you want them to submit, and the best way to do that is through a form document. And finally, number 7 here is any supplemental information about what is going to understand the project here, right? So there's a couple different resources specific to the RFP side of things that are included in the report. We have the RFP schedule calculator. What this does here is it will lay out the optimal schedule based on your needs. I'm going to show you this here in a minute. We have a cost proposal form. So how do you actually evaluate cost? Well, I'll kind of walk you through that. We have the RFP contents and scorecard, and then finally is the technology demonstration score sheet. So let's go through, and I want to show you a couple examples of this. The first one I'm going to show is the RFP schedule calculator. So I'm going to bring this up on the screen here. What this sheet will do is it will automatically calculate a schedule for you based on the key activities that are required for this project here. So here we go. So let's go ahead and let's dive into this here. Right? So my project is, let's say I'm buying a CMMS new implementation. All right, so I type in the project name. Next question here it has for us, so these green highlights here, these are information we fill out. So when do we expect the statement of work to be completed? So let's pick a date. So let's go with, today's May 10th, so let's go with June 10th. That's a Saturday, let's not do that, right? We don't, let's do June 8th. That's a Thursday, June 8th. And then what this will do here is it'll put together a schedule based on your key dates here, right? So by, for example, the May 31st, planning meeting and procurement supply chain, that's when that should take place. There's a duration of 30 days with that. Compile the scope of work by the 1st of June, and then finally the RFP or the statement of work is ready for release here, right? So, and I've gotten word here that my mouse is too shaky, so I will not move that as much, and I will stop doing that. Okay. When we scroll down here a little bit, let me bring this up here. In terms of the selection phase, there's other dates that are provided with this. So again, we have when you release the RFP to the vendors, release the proposal information. We have other key details that are here. And again, this is all automated. Now, you might say, you know what, I need to get the vendors more time to submit their proposals. So instead of 24 days, I'm going to give them, let's say, 35 days. So I'll type in 35, and that will extend out the date here, right? Now, obviously, your organization may have different needs and different key things to think about with this, but the intent of this is that it will help you account for the major items that we need to think about as you go through and develop a procurement schedule. There might be nuances or other things that you need to account for in your particular process, that's fine. But what this represents is that this is our recommended approach for how we do this here. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more because one other thing we provide here is on the right-hand side of our schedule items. I'll highlight this here. On the right-hand side of this, we provide some commentary about the best way to do some of these other things, right? So about 1 week for RFP after release for the meeting, other things to keep in mind here with that. So that's the RFP schedule calculator tool. The other thing I want to highlight here, let me pull this up, is our cost proposal form. So here's the cost proposal form. Now, there can be a lot of variance here, but what I'm trying to highlight here is that when I go through this form, let me zoom in here a little bit. So this document is one of the forms that you'd ask your vendors to submit. And I'll stop moving my mouse here. This is one of the documents that you'd ask your vendors to submit as they respond to the RFP. So we have, in many cases, it's going to be a 5-year deal. So you have years 1 through 5. You have licensing, storage, hardware, maintenance support, other items here, and you have total cost. This is the type of thing I would strongly recommend that you provide to your vendors as they go through and think about how are they going to submit their cost to you here. There's different ways. There might be other things you're interested in, but what you don't want to do here is that this is basically all the detail that I'd recommend you collect here. I wouldn't go overboard with the nuances and all the details here because otherwise it can be very cumbersome for the vendors to respond and it's going to drive away competition, right? And you definitely don't want to do that here. So we have licensing and support costs. The other major things you may want to think about are implementation cost. So if you have integration with existing systems, migration of data, other things related to that, you kind of want to break this down here for what those might look like. And then finally is the total cost. Add up the items above and give us a total number. So this is what I mean by a cost proposal form, or an example of a form that you want the vendors to fill out, and that makes it a lot easier. The last thing I'm going to show you from the RFP tools that were included inside this report is how do we structure our RFPs? So let's go through and kind of do this again here. So let's say that you have an RFP that you're looking at and you're asking yourselves, well, how do I actually structure this RFP? And if you think through about those 7 components I recommended, this tool here I'm showing you now is synced up with that. And it's a tool for you to go through and evaluate how well have I organized my RFP. So let's say I'm the organization. Let's say this is ABC Company, and the project name is going to be CMMS implementation and purchase. So that's my project. The assessment date, this is the date that we're going to go through and we actually go through and do the assessment. So I'll go with, let's say today is May 31st, and this is what we did, right? Now this is a summary sheet here. This is all automated based on the scores that you're going to do on the second page. So this is going to stay the way it is. We have feedbacks and strengths. So as you go through and you look at the RFPs, you can make some comments here that you need to enhance the statement of work. It's confusing, right? These are just internal comments for us as an organization when we go through the RFP for things to think about, right? So this is actually not a strength. That's an area for improvement, right? Strength maybe you included a realistic budget. Great, right? Whatever that might be, right? Now on the second page here, this is where the value of the sport really comes out here. So when you go through and look at the overall format, we have some comments here about, in terms of how you structure your RFP, some things to think about. The document is concise or organized. Looks great. Easy to follow, not confusing, right? And we have all these different comments here. And as you go through and ask yourself, when you're looking at your draft RFP, is how well does this meet all the requirements, right? Now I'm going to kind of blast through this here just to illustrate what's going on. And obviously, this is just meant to help provide an overall perspective as to where the project is at. So I'm going to go through, answer some of these things here, and there we go. Once I finish this out here, it will give me an overall RFP score, so 65%, okay? Now, when I scroll up to the top here, this will summarize the overall RFP. Okay, let me take a quick pause here and talk about why this is so useful. The reason why this tool is useful for us is meant to be a discussion tool. It's meant to help us focus in on the main things that we need to think about. And if you think about the submittal forms and attachments, our score here is 50%. So if we're going to think about how do we enhance our RFP, that's probably where we should spend some time and effort to put that together here, right? The other thing I'll say too about this tool, that this is not meant to be used inside a vacuum. You should sit down with procurement and you should use this together as you evaluate the overall RFP, right? That's what this is meant to do. This is not provided publicly. It's not meant to, say you did a terrible job, you got a 65% here. What it's meant to do is provide guidance as to how we can improve our overall RFP. Okay, so those are some of the RFP tools. There's a couple other things that are included as well. The technology demonstration score sheet, that's included in the full reports. If you pull that up, you will certainly get access to that here. Okay, so in terms of evaluation criteria, some other things we found in terms of the RFPs we collected and analyzed, some of the major things here, right? Less than half, 48% of them shared their evaluation weights. And what that means here is that they had a list of criteria that they were looking at, but they didn't tell the vendors, well, the cost is weighted at 30%. The interviews are weighted at 25%. Your project plan is weighted at 50%, right? They didn't tell the vendors that. That is a best practice, is to tell the vendors inside of your RFP, here's the different criteria and here's the weights that we're going to use here, right? The second thing we found is about a quarter of the RFPs we looked at only provided a cost template. So that document I just showed you about the different costs, only 25% of the folks that included that. The reason why you want to do that here is because it helps us make us an apples to apples comparison in terms of all the proposal forms, right? I know it can be difficult. Financially it's difficult to evaluate cost on these types of projects here, but that's why having those cost templates can really make it a lot easier. And then thirdly is that none of the RFPs that we looked at share the project budget. How much money do we expect to spend? And again, that's a key thing to think about with that. Here's a summary of the different criteria that we looked at. So here's the different things that were common to the RFPs. Here's the criteria. Here are the average weights that were included. And here are the different ranges. So some folks had 10%, 65%. Our recommendation is to have no one criteria weighted more than 35%, right? That's the best way to do that. The reason being is that if you put too much emphasis on one particular criteria, well, then obviously that's what we're going to focus on, right? So you might be thinking then, well, shoot, if that's true, then I'm going to put cost at like 80% because we got to make sure we save a lot of money on this project. That is like the last thing you should do, right? Now, I'm not suggesting here that if you do that, it's going to cost more. In fact, it's far from it here. But if you tell the industry, we're really only interested in price, then that's what they will focus on. And what we find is that when you have like a low bid perspective, the thing with that is that it's really unpredictable, right? If we think about different technology providers, different technology systems, um, there are differences. And because of that, price is not the only thing that we need to consider here, especially if you've been through a technology buy before, you know how difficult some of that can be here. In terms of typical timelines, there's really four main phases. So the bidding phase, the evaluation phase of those proposals, the negotiation phase, and implementation. So again, on average, the average time to prepare the proposals was 1 month. We have some folks, and I don't know how, but they had a week for the vendors to respond. Some folks that were upwards of 2.5 months. Regardless of what you do here, a month bidding period is about enough right here. But again, our recommendation is to provide the full schedule for transparency. Publish the full schedule inside of the RFP because your vendors will really, really appreciate that, right? In terms of the statement of work, I want to clarify what that is here. There's the RFP, which has those 7 sections we talked about. The statement of work is the first section inside of the RFP. And what this does here is describes the overall needs of the organization as you go through and think about the project, right? Of the projects that we looked at, 2% of them share the budget, not zero, actually 2%. 30% share the schedule, and less than 5% provided the current conditions, right? The reason why this is, I would say, staggering is that if I'm a vendor and I don't have information about the budget or the current conditions, it is extremely difficult for me to put together a quality proposal that can actually meet your needs, right? Now, you might be thinking as an owner, well, I don't know what my budget is, or I don't know what things are currently at today. That's why I'm hiring somebody to do that, and I understand that. My advice here today is to do the best you can. Right? We have a whole class, a whole workshop on how to actually develop a statement of work. So if you have questions, be sure to drop me an email at the end. I can certainly walk you through that here. But my recommendation here is to do the best you can with statement of work because your vendors will really appreciate that, right? When you think about a good statement of work, there's really 5 main things to keep in mind as you put this together. The overview and purpose, in other words, why are we doing this project? The future state, how will things be different at the end of the project? The third part of your statement of work are any itemized requirements. In other words, specifically, what are you asking the vendors to do? Number 4 is the schedule and the budget. So if you have any schedule or financial constraints, be sure to talk about that. And then finally, is there anything unique about the project, right? So when you schedule or when you put together your full RFP, the first part of that is a statement of work, and the first part of your statement of work here is the overview and purpose. Now, I want to be clear with you. I am speaking literally here. When I talk about the actual like Word file, the docx file for your RFP, what I mean is the first thing on the page is the overview and purpose, right? Sometimes I see organizations that have like a long history. In 1872, the city of whoever started whatever, right? We probably have all this history here, and we don't need to do that. The main things that vendors want to do, or what they want to know about, is why you're doing this project. Put it up front, make it easier for folks to do this here. Now, this next slide here is really controversial. We're going to spend just a quick moment on this here, but this is like absolutely critical. This is really important here. The question for you all is should we issue the budget? How much money that you have available for the project? Should you include that inside of your RFP? And the answer in size 400 font is yes. Absolutely, without a doubt, 100% include your budget. The reason being here is that if you are trying to hire an expert vendor, one of the main things they're going to look at or what they need to know is how much money do you have available for the project, right? Now, if you have concerns about that, one of the main concerns about providing that budget is that, well, if I do that, then all the vendors are going to inflate their cost, right? If I have, $5 million to spend on something, and I tell everybody about that, then everybody's going to come in at like $4.9 million, and that's what I'm concerned about. If the actual cost is like $3 million, that means I lost on $2 million, right? We're all concerned that the vendors will inflate their price, right? To understand that, ask yourself a couple of questions, right? The first one might be is, how often do you have more money than you actually need, right? More than likely, what happens here is that we actually don't have enough money in the first place. So rarely do we have enough money to begin with here. But let's say you actually do. Let's say you have extra money in the budget, and so maybe it's possible that vendors can inflate their cost here. The natural competitive forces of the market means that all the vendors are incentivized to provide a realistic cost to deliver the product, right? So there's competitive forces here that will keep people at bay and stop them from inflating their budgets. The main reason why we provide our budget and why this is like an absolutely best practice is that it helps the vendors, the expert vendors, know what's going to happen on our project. That's the main thing. Without that budget number, the vendors can actually go in, look at our scope, and deliver something that they need. So please provide your budget. There's actually a white paper included inside of the tech report that provides details about how this works and why you should do that. So if you have questions, read the white paper, buy the report, reach out to me again via email. More than happy to talk about that. Okay. Okay. When you think about the impacts of uh, the other thing here too with the scope of work is including the current conditions. So you have their statement of work, which is what you're looking to buy, and the current conditions. Those two go together. Many times the owner, in most RFPs that I've seen, we tend to exclude this part of it. We don't include it, and because of that, it can be really challenging here, right? So we need to include the current conditions, and it's commonly overlooked here, but when we do that, it makes it a lot easier for our vendors to understand what the difficulties are in terms of going forward on the project, right? Now, when you think about a poorly prepared scope of work or statement of work, um, let's imagine for a minute here that the vendors, the people that are thinking about proposing in our project, let's say they have these perceptions about us as an owner, as a facilities organization. They think that the scope of work that they have that you've issued is unclear. It's maybe too prescriptive, right? Too much details, unrealistic. You're fishing, right? All these other things here. The impact on this is that we'll have fewer proposals, lower quality proposals, less qualified firms, right? I mean, ask yourself, if you were a vendor and you felt that the owner, for example, already had a favorite or already had a technology solution in mind here, what is your interest or your incentive then to go through and provide a quality proposal in response to this RFP? And the answer is a big fat zero, right? Nothing. And the reason being is that if there's a perception out there in the industry that you already know what you want as an owner, they're not going to waste their time and effort. And that is really, really difficult to overcome. We have worked with a number of organizations in delivering IT projects and procurements. And it's interesting that when you are able to convince the industry, and we actually follow through on that, that we want the best solution for our project, and here's our constraints, people will start coming out of the woodworks. If the industry is convinced we're actually trying to be fair and open and honest about how we're doing the procurement, the vendors will play. The vendors, the best vendors, that's who they want to work for here, right? So if you find yourself in a situation where you're not getting enough proposals, or maybe the proposals you do get are not very good, well, what you should do then is think about what are the perceptions that the vendors have of us as an organization, right? That's a big discussion here, but that's something to keep in mind. In terms of the RFP, excuse me, the statement of work resources that are included in the report, there's a statement of work assessment. There's a template for gathering requirements. And again, I mentioned the white paper about sharing the budget, so that's also included. Let's take a quick look at the statement of work assessment tool that's included with the report. And here it is. So the way this works here, again, this is meant to be a tool that will help us understand the statement of work. So let's go through the client. Let's say I am a XYZ corporation, FM department. My project is going to be a new security system. And today's date is going to be, let's say, I don't know, June 15th of 2023. Okay. So again, just like the other tool here, you're going to go through and answer a series of questions. 1 means not good or not included. 5 means it's amazing. So do you provide a clear overview on the project? Let's say that our overview looked at about a 3. The goals and objectives for why you're doing this project, oh, that's about a 2. Key measures of success, let's say that's a 4. As you go through this, it will update the average scores as you go through and fill this out. Now, you might not know what I mean by like key measures of success when I look at this. The report provides details and guidance as to what that actually means here. So it's not like you're just filling this out blind. We do provide details as to how to fill that out here, right? And there's other different parts to it, the future states, itemized requirements, schedule and budget, anything else here that you might want to include with this here. Again, just like the RFP tool, the intent of this assessment is to serve as a discussion tool as you work with procurement, as you work with end users to develop the overall project budget, excuse me, the project's scope. So as you put that together here, that's what that's meant to do. And Ashley, can you give me a quick heads up? Am I still on audio? Or somebody in the chat box? I just want to make sure.
Yes, you're still on.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so those are the statement of work tools here. Again, super helpful for that. So if you have any questions, be sure to check that out. And let's keep going here. Again, folks, I see a couple questions that have come in. I see all those. Damien had a couple and other folks. We will get to those at the end of our presentation. So keep the questions coming, and we will certainly get to those in just a few minutes here, right? So the big picture as we think about this here is that, again, the reason why we're thinking about this tech report and what this is meant to do for us is that there's so many areas or opportunities for improvement, right? Transparency and evaluation of weights and criteria, provide those, balance on those criteria, clarity in the RFP and the project timelines, detailed requirements and what those needs are, a complete and accurate statement of work, complete and accurate current conditions, putting these together here and following through on the guidance that provided in the report will make that a lot easier. I also mentioned that we do have this RFP library. That the website, there's a website link inside of the report that is just about wrapped up, and we have a full library. So if you want to buy, let's say, an asset management RFP, right? You can go to the website and can download sample RFPs from other organizations that have done this before that will be useful as you go through and think about that. So that'll be on the website. Check it out. It will hopefully be a valuable, positive resource for you on this. Kind of moving on now, the rest report, we do talk about different technology procurement case studies. We have 4 case studies that are provided for this. Room reservations software, CMMS, surveillance, video surveillance system, and finally a work order management system. For each one of these case studies, we provide a lot of detail about the context, the purpose of it. We talk about any best practices specific to that particular technology that we're looking at. We talk about implementation, and there's other details about that as well. Again, the report provides a lot more detail, but I want to give you a flavor of what's included inside of that report. Something unique about this report too we also included was what are the vendors' perspectives on IT procurement? So many times as an owner or as a buyer of services, we're focused on our organization, what we need here. And we thought it would be useful to talk to the industry, to our vendor partners, and ask them, when you are involved on a IT delivery or even proposing on an IT RFP, what are some of the main things you think about? Because as a buyer of these services, knowing the vendor's perspective can help us actually do a better job of delivering that RFP, right? So as we talk to several vendors, there's kind of really 3 main things that they think about in terms of responding to the RFP. The first one is the technical strategy. In other words, what does the owner actually need, and can I provide that, right? If they have a good idea of what you're looking to get and they can't do it, then they don't need to waste their time. They don't need to waste your time as a buyer, and they could go, can go somewhere else. So the technical needs of what you're actually looking to do. The second thing is the financial perspective. How much money is available? What are they asking for? And is it a possibility, or do I have creative ideas that I can still meet the need of this organization? And then thirdly is their political strategy. Now, this one was interesting. This was something that we didn't fully expect to hear from the vendors, but basically what this is here is that the vendors want to understand who's involved on the RP process, but especially they want to be convinced that you as an owner have developed a fair and equal procurement process. That's a major, major thing here, folks, is that if I am a vendor and I am worried that the owner is not going to be fair or not actually do a good job in the procurement evaluation process, I'm going to walk. And that was very evident from the folks that we talked to as we go through this year, right? So some of the main points that we talked to about this is that The vendors want the opportunity to demonstrate their solutions, but the proof of concept, right? There's really two kinds of vendors as we think about this. There's vendors that can actually do what they say they can do, and then there is everybody else that just does a lot of talk. They can't fully do what you're asking for. The expert vendors we found here is that they actually want to demonstrate their full system, and not like PowerPoint slides of what they're looking at. They want to do a full live demonstration of their product because that's a much more powerful and effective way to think about these things here. All right, so they want to do that. All right, implementation is absolutely critical. So if you have other systems that you're going to integrate this technology to, then it's important to make sure you talk about what those implementations are, because as a vendor, that's going to significantly affect how I think about this. And thirdly, the vendors also talked about they want to better understand, again, this gets back to the strategies I mentioned, but they want to understand why are you interested in buying this technology, right? What's the why behind this? What challenges or problems are you thinking about here? And frankly, folks, if you structure your statement of work and your RFPs like we've talked about and what's included in the report, this will result in a statement of work that meets these vendors' needs and requirements, right? So again, thinking about the vendor's perspective and why they're involved with this will absolutely make a difference if you keep that in mind. Or put ourselves in the shoes of the vendors will help us maintain a good positive rapport with our industry partners. All right, two more major sections here. The next thing we looked at inside the report is what is a future forecast of this technology. We had a Delphi panel of different IT leaders, and we asked them, their perspectives on these different things. And I want to highlight today, new technology trends, the next 5 years, and then finally 10 years out from that here, right? So new trends for today. The first thing we found is that drone technology. By the way, folks, if you've not flown drones before, I'll just talk personally here. It's really, really fun, right? They're a lot of fun. Just don't crash it. I've crashed my drone once. It was not fun. A lot of money to fix it. But drones are an extremely valuable tool. So I've been involved on some research about using drones to do roof inspections, which most of FMs were involved with that. I've done a lot of roof inspections over my career. And I used to walk on the roofs. Right now, walking on the roofs is still an important part of doing that. But now there's drone technology that allows you to go up there, capture pictures, and you don't have to get on a ladder, and you don't have to fall off the roof, and it's a lot safer. Other things that are going on here today is digitalization of historically physical records. So you take your as-built drawings, which are 11 by 17 sheets of paper, converting them to GIS, or basically those result in BIM models. So you can go on the computer, and that makes them much more accessible to other folks that have an interest in that. And finally, increasing use of hybrid work environments. That's kind of all the rage, obviously because of COVID and work from home. So there's more ongoing with this. IFMA is currently working on a study that's meant to better understand this, so be on the lookout for that. But those are some of the current trends that we're seeing today here. In the next 5 years, we're going to see tighter integration of BIM and CMMS and building automation. I kind of talked about how we have lots of data, and those different data points, they are from systems. And one of the common themes in talking with our Delphi panelists is that these different systems here are going to be much more closely integrated with each other, right? So based on the building needs, it can file like automated maintenance requests and buy procure different needs or disposables for the building, right? There'll be a much more tighter integration of some of these different needs here, right? Data collection will become a lot richer. Again, I talked about the big data, so there'll be more of that, and again, increasing user friendliness as to what's going to happen. Now, in terms of 10 years out, again, some of the main things we've seen, a single source of truth. What that means is that there is one place that represents everything about the building. Everything's all integrated. That's kind of where we're thinking that things will go in the next 10 years here. Internet of Things, those are common. IT, this last bullet point, IT personnel dedicated to FM, this was interesting. Basically what the idea behind this is here is that you think about your typical FM department. You have your carpenters, you have your generalists, you have your electricians, and in the future it's expected that you'll have somebody on staff inside of FM who's like the FM systems IT person, right? That's pretty foreign for a lot of organizations, but it's expected that will also come up here. Artificial intelligence to FM, that's currently all the rage. For example, we all know what's going on at Chat GPT is currently a very hot topic. I've certainly played it with myself. It is pretty incredible. It's not totally accurate here, but it is certainly something to keep in mind. If you've not played with it before, I suggest you to play with it. Some of the things I can do are just incredible. Again, it's not totally accurate. There are, take it with a grain of salt. Trust me on that here, but there are certainly technologies to think about that. And again, as from an FM perspective, based on what I'm seeing, I think there might be ways to help us, right? Artificial intelligence here, folks, is not a one-stop shop, right? It is meant to be a tool in the tool belt. That's what it's meant to do. And if it can make us better, faster, more efficient, then we should be all about it. Again, this is where we're kind of expecting the future to go here, right? And so keep that in mind. And of course, I, for one, welcome our future computer overlords. That's a that's a reference to Jeopardy. If you've not seen the episode of Jeopardy where they had a supercomputer on the episode, it was awesome. Take a look, Watson, and it's kind of fun. So to kind of close us out here, preparing for tech implementation. Again, I talked about the organizational change management perspective of this. Is that when you think about going through and delivering a new technology project, it's important to do this effectively. And we offer some commentary in the report. The main thing that I want you to take away with this is that using change agents correctly when you're rolling out your new system here is of paramount importance. Absolutely paramount, right? When we talk about a change agent, what that means here is a peer or somebody that's going to be using the system that is seen as a peer to the people that are also using the system. If you have the executive or the boss say, "Ye shall use this system and don't ask questions," that is never going to work, right? But if you have the frontline people using the system, they have good experience with it, and they can show everybody else how to use the system, the likelihood of adoption will absolutely go up, right? We've got a lot of data about this. I don't have time to go through all the nuances here, but just using change agents correctly to help roll out these new systems can absolutely be a big deal here, right? So, and finally, the last thing I want to just talk about here is in terms of tools and templates. These are all the things that are included inside of the RFP, or excuse me, the report that's included various appendices. So a lot of hands-on tools. When we developed this report, our internal charge, and as we thought about this, is that as an FM, what I have found is that they need things that make our lives easier yesterday, right? We need to provide tools that can actually make your job faster and more efficient. So as you take a look at these tools, these are meant to be used on real projects, real efforts. Keep that in mind, and just keep that in mind here, right? In summary, IT procurement is super difficult. That's a technical term, right? Really challenging. Keep that in mind here. Treat it like org change. I've talked about that extensively. But again, when you think about evaluating technology, be laser focused on where has this product been used before and how they're going to fit inside of my organization. If you'd like a copy of the slides, please feel free to email myself, Jake Smithwick, or my co-author here, Brian Lyons. We're both, our emails up are here on the screen. Be sure to reach out to us, and we're more than happy to answer any questions or provide a copy of the slides as well. So let's take some time for questions. Let me kind of bump through the questions here. And again, I know there's been lots of commenters that just give me a minute here, but if you do have questions, be sure to jump in. And let me just kind of see here. By the way, folks, happy FM Day. Happy World FM Day. This is fantastic. And certainly this is a great opportunity to be presenting with you all here, right? So one of the first questions I see here from Jody was, will this report also cover for new builds or heavy remodels? The way this report is structured in terms of technologies is to be applicable across the board. So whether this is you're buying like a retrofit of an existing technology, if you're looking to buy a brand new technology, the report will provide guidance on either types of the systems, because we highlight our goal here is to emphasize the principles, and how you implement those is kind of up to your organization. So the answer is yes, Jody, we will certainly do that, right? We have another comment too from Mr. Dean Stanberry. Dean, I'm so glad you're here today. He is our IFMA Global Chair. So Dean, fantastic to have you on the board here today. Discuss the importance of understanding your functional requirements, core business needs before looking at products or issuing. Dean, if we were in person here, I would give you a high five, because that is absolutely one of the key things to think about here. And really what that is here is think about a statement of work. Having a good statement of work and think about what are our true needs for what we need to do is paramount, right? We shouldn't be looking at product demos. We shouldn't do all this other stuff here because um, that's going to sway us in one right. It's a very touchy-feely perspective, which is nothing wrong with that here. But when you think about needs and requirements, that's where you should start. The tools provided in this report will certainly provide some good details in terms of how to go through and to think about that. So Dean, thank you so much. Really, really agree with your comment here. We had another comment earlier from Fred Holder talking about the budget. I saw that comment come over about not providing that budget number. I have seen that. So Fred's comment here is if you don't provide the budget, then many times the proposals can come in over budget. And I tell you what, folks, that is a really, really difficult situation to be in, right? If you have a budget threshold of this and you don't tell anybody about this, all the proposals coming up here, now we've got a uncomfortable conversation at best. And at worst, the project's canceled, right? So my advice is be transparent, tell people what's going on. The vendors will really appreciate that. I know it can be difficult or challenging to do that, to provide that budget number because of those concerns that, well, they're just gonna, stick it to us here. And we have run literally thousands of procurements and it just does not happen. But what does happen is the best vendors come out of the woodworks. They provide their most innovative ideas within the financial constraints you have here. And it's absolutely a great thing to do that. So Fred, thank you for your perspective here. Let's see here, going through the comments. So Paul has a question. What are the most common CMMS systems you see being purchased recently? We don't speak to specific IT solutions or CMMS systems on the market here today, but again, that's part of the scoping worksheet. So if you go through and think about what you're trying to do, where the needs of that'll kind of go through and think about what that's going to entail. I would also recommend that I would not necessarily specify, we want this specific system unless there's a need to do so, right? If you have an existing solution, then maybe there's a need to do that. But the way I would think about it is think about the goals and requirements you have for the project and less about the means and methods of what you're trying to get done, right? We want to think about, here's the problems I'm having. You as a vendors offer the best solutions to meet those needs. And when you have that perspective here, it minimizes the need for us to specify specific solutions and more about, well, vendors offer us the best solutions you think that would meet our particular needs. Great question. Thank you. Some other questions here. How can you work with your procurement sourcing team? This is from a LinkedIn user to conduct the best research on narrowing down to the top 3 to 5 tech solutions and vendors. The team isn't normally the SME in our industry. I don't know who asked this question, but this is a fantastic question. Absolutely, right? So how do you actually work with procurement to do these things here? Well, there's a couple of things that I think about in mind. The first thing here is that the different assessment tools, like the RFP assessment, the statement of work assessment, those are meant to be used in conjunction with your procurement team, right? So as you go through and think about, hey, here's what I have, my goals, here's my expectations. As a matter of fact, before you meet with procurement, to have some of those things already thought about, that will make that a lot easier. Now, the question here is like, how do we get down to the top 3 to 5 solutions? Really what you're talking about here is a short list. And the way I would do that is I would go through and have your initial proposal evaluation. So like the cost, their written proposals and other documents you want to look at. If you have a bunch of teams that have proposed here, then you can shortlist down and go through product demonstrations and go through that approach with just the top 3 to 5 firms. So it's a simple shortlisting process is the best way to do that. Now, this is not included inside the report, but depending on the needs and the expectations of this particular project, is that you may want to split out the actual product from the implementation side of it. So you have the product itself, and then you have the implementers. The people are going to take that product and implement it in your organization. When we work with organizations, typically we split those up, which means you pick your product based on whatever criteria you're going to use, which is discussed inside of the report. And then you take that product, you tell the industry, hey, we want to buy this product. All the implementers then will come and say, well, we can implement that product based on what you need to do here. You don't always want to do a two-step, and there's some nuances to think about that. That's kind of a more advanced strategy, and that's a little bit outside the scope of the tech report that we provide for IFMA. But if you have more questions about that, certainly reach out to me. because there can be some advantages to think about that as we go through and deliver that. Great question from Paulina. What as procurement can do to better support FM? Paulina, I assume you work in procurement, which is fantastic. I think the biggest thing that we can do here is kind of delegate the activities, meaning that as FM, we don't need to be responsible for actually managing the procurement, right? Finding the best vendors, going through the demos. I mean, that's not something we should, as FM, we should be specifying. But what FM can do is to help specify the needs and the challenges that we have as an organization. So I think one of the biggest things you can do if you're a procurement person is to take the statement of work checklist or the RFP checklist and sit down with your FM folks and say, hey, we have this new tool and guide, and how can we partner together to go through and fill out some of these key sections here to deliver a better procurement experience. So my recommendation from that standpoint is to see us as a unified team, that not procurement is just trying to make this difficult, and FM, that's not all what this should be here. It's a unified effort, and our goal here, our singular focus should be on identifying the best, most qualified vendors. That's what this whole thing is about. And anything else that doesn't focus on that is ancillary and is not really focused on what we should do here, right? Pauline, if you have other questions, definitely reach out to me. That's kind of a nuanced discussion, but certainly feel free to drop me an email, and I'd be glad to chat with you further on that. Okay, other questions or comments? Any other questions or comments? Give it a few seconds here, and then we'll wrap it up. Again, if you'd like a copy of the slides here today, drop myself or Brian an email. I think IFMA is also going to be sending out an email message follow-up with as well. I think the purchase report link was dropped in to the chat box. So if you would like to purchase report, be sure to take a look at that. Any other final questions or comments? All right. Well, folks, on behalf of myself and Brian, we really appreciate the opportunity for being here today. I can think of, there's lots of fun things we've done, but it's great that it's World FM Day. Thank you for being here today, and I'll turn the time back over to Nick Rocha from IFMA. Nick, go ahead.
Thank you, Jake. Excellent job as always. Much appreciated. To our attendees, we hope you found benefit in this webinar, and we look forward to supporting your future educational needs. Thank you.
All right, take care, y'all. Bye.